What's going on, you guys? Welcome to the Unlock Your Freedom podcast with Kevin Kepple. If you're looking to create more in your life, and if you want more of anything, it's not about doing more, it's about being more. So I'm excited you're here, and I'll see you guys on the inside. All right, well, you had a really cool summer job, like way cooler than any job I've ever had in the summer. So you worked at Yellowstone Park for 2 summers, I think. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So I worked in Yellowstone when I was 20 and 21, in between my college years during the summer. And I got the idea to do that because my dad did it for a few summers in the 80s. And he was always talking about like all of the adventures and stuff that he had. And so, like, I was a good kid and I got good grades and everything, did everything, checked all the boxes that I was supposed to. And then I came home and I didn't have a job at home, but I did at my school. And of course they were shut down for the summer. And so I was just kind of like chilling out, and my parents were like, you need to get a summer job. And I'm like, can I not have a break? So the next summer I just decided to go to Yellowstone and sort of deem it revenge employment. Like, if I'm going to get a job, I'm going to get a job for summer. So I ended up going out to the mountains, working a glamorous job as a housekeeper, which that's got a lot of stories on its own. And usually when I tell people I worked in Yellowstone, they're like, were you a park ranger? And it's like, no, I wish. Park rangers are like the celebrities in Yellowstone. But I worked there for a few summers. You'd be cleaning a toilet, look outside the window, and there'd be like a bison right outside whatever building or cabin you were working on. And it was just totally surreal, but in the best possible way. So that's what I did for a total of 6 months. So about 3 months per summer for a couple of them.
And I know Yellowstone's massive, but what's one of your favorite features at Yellowstone?
What I really liked is if you wanted to go hiking, there'd be like a mountain, like a mile in your backyard, because we all lived in a dorm type of structure. It was like my building was like a 2-floor, like rectangular sort of building, and everyone just kind of lived there. And, if you got off work or something, everyone would be like, hey, you want to just like go out back and climb that mountain? And it would just be like taking a walk around the neighborhood. It was just like so casual, and it was just such a regular thing for people to do. And it was kind of cool just being like, yo, like, let's go climb that mountain back there, just an after work hike. And it would be the most casual thing ever. So that was kind of cool. Just the convenience of adventures, I guess.
Yeah, that's pretty spectacular. I wish I had a mountain in my backyard. We have a shortage of mountains in Texas, or Dallas at least. So.
I'm in Illinois. Like, we're lucky if we get a hill,
Yeah, I know. I lived in Chicago and I was excited. I'm like, oh, cool. Maybe they have mountains. And then it's like the second flattest state in the U.S., I think, or something like that.
Oh, is it?
That's what somebody said. So then I read it on the internet too. So it must be true, right? Like, that's
no
the rules,
kidding.
So.
I have a sticker on the back of my car that says mountains, please. And it seems so silly having that in the middle of Illinois.
Yeah. Yeah,
but, we can dream.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what about at Yellowstone? I know a lot of the pages I follow on social media are national park pages or different parks. In particular, in Yellowstone's one of them. And I see a lot of people, not a lot, but a fair amount of people doing things they probably shouldn't be doing, like getting off the sidewalk, going really close to large animals like bison and taking pictures, and when the bison charges, running away and leaving their kid there to as bait almost. I don't think they did it on purpose, but I don't think people understand that, this isn't the zoo. You can't just walk right up to the animals. But I was curious what kind of things you saw that maybe you could warn people against.
Yeah, so people like that have a nickname called Turons, and it's a hybrid between Turon and a moron.
Yeah.
And it's like there's this so one of the most popular animals out there that's just everywhere, they're like rabbits or deer, are bison. And I think people have this misconception that they're just like cows, and they are in terms of size, but not in terms of temperament. You could just breathe in their direction and they'll find a reason to hate you. So, and they're everywhere, right? So it's easy for people to, kind of want to get out of their cars and test limits and like befriend nature in, the classic Disney way, like, oh, it'll just kind of sense my good intentions and then I'll just have this magical connection with a bison. And it's usually not how it goes. So when I got there in Yellowstone, and of course there's like bears and, moose and elk and all these like huge animals. And there's like this orientation when you get there, and where it's, you almost get like animal training, where it's like, okay, if you see a bear, give it, I don't know what it was, like 200, 400 feet of space. And rule of thumb is that you always carry bear spray on you. But in terms of, like tragic events that have happened, I haven't seen any, but I've heard a whole lot about them. I worked with someone, a coworker of mine, and she had a friend who, she didn't have an interaction with an animal, but she got too close to the edge of a hiking trail and ended up falling off the cliff. So it's like, these are like real life,
Yikes.
you know, things where, it's not all like roses and daisies. Like working in Yellowstone is great. It's a wonderful opportunity. There's so many exciting things that you can do, at the drop of a hat at a moment's notice if you wanted to. But there's also like so many dangerous aspects to it. If it's not the animals, it's, hiking in the backcountry and getting lost, or it's, taking the wrong footing and falling off a cliff. And it's like constantly enjoy, like you want to enjoy yourself, but it's also exercising your better judgment and knowing when you're pushing your limits, and also kind of, respecting the boundaries that people have put in place. Like don't get too close to that edge, or don't go off the trail, don't pitch that tent off, some random trail. It's a very interesting type of, I don't know if culture is the right word, but it's like a, person living in the country versus a person living in the city. It's, there's like different ways of going about your daily life, and it's like a whole other type of living situation out there for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, rule number one, don't die, right? And you can pretty easily identify the types of things that may be deadly. I think I'd just follow the simple protocols put in place. But, anyways, well, you're a best-selling author, a book strategist, a
Mm.
writer extraordinaire. So, has that always been a love, or what's the why behind all that genius?
So I did a whole lot of journaling, like classic diary entry, like go in my room and talk about what happened at recess type of thing. I did a lot of that growing up, and it continued into my adulthood. And I feel like the journaling was sort of like a gateway into like the bigger ambition, whether that be like, in my case it was writing a full-on book. But what really helped about that was it allowed me a space to say things without actually saying them, which sounds kind of silly, but like I'm like a chronic people pleaser. Like I tend to appeal to what people expect of me, or what people, just I tend to appeal kind of to what people want. And so if I had a strong opinion to voice of my own that I was too scared about, or if I wanted to tell a story that I didn't want other people to know about, it was very easy to write it down on paper because I got it out without verbally saying anything. So that allowed me to exercise a whole lot of self awareness and reflection and empathy and self compassion and all these great skills that make for a really good story when you get older and you decide to do something like write a book. So in the case of Yellowstone, my book is called The Finer Things Club. It's about working in Yellowstone. And I relied heavily on a lot of those journal entries when I was working there to inform me of like what happened, and the particular sensations that I was feeling in the moment, like if I was going hiking, like what the air smelled like, for example. And I combined the sort of self-reflection skills and empathy that I've built over the years through a lot of journaling with my documentation to create my first big project, which was the book. So doing that sort of proved to myself that I could do something like write a book, because everyone wants to write a book. Like who wouldn't want to? And being able to prove to yourself that you can is incredibly powerful. And once you get a taste of that, you're like, oh my gosh, like either I want to write some more, or I want to help people write theirs, or sometimes it's both. So I think the book slash writing thing was kind of gradual. It was kind of building up over time. But, I think in my case, when I decided to put it towards something bigger, it really, really paid off. And it kind of felt like I was in my groove, like I was in my element. So it was kind of easy to do that, but it was kind of stretching the bounds and like the depth, or the depth of whatever project I was working on.
Yeah, share the name of your book with everybody.
It's called The Finer Things Club,
Oh,
the Summertime Chronicles of a Yellowstone Housekeeping Employee. And
okay.
it's available on Amazon. It's got Kindle. paperback and hardcover. But that book came out this past June, so it's still relatively new. But I think I just more wanted to write it for the sake of writing it,
Yeah.
and I hope other people get something out of it. Whether and it's very coming of age too, so it's really great for like young adults and stuff who are trying to figure out their life a little bit. But um, yeah, it was just it's such a unique experience. Like who talks about working in Yellowstone? And my goal really was just to not only let people know that that's something that's possible, but that you know it's it's sometimes fun to go off and do what's unexpected, I guess.
Yeah, very cool. So I read a book once. It was great, and it was actually fiction, but it was about some things that were happening in Yellowstone, and it was talking about some of the people that worked there. And one of the things they did, I'm trying to remember the name. I think they called it flamers. Do you know what that is? Is that a real thing?
No,
No. Okay.
it sounds awesome. No, I've
They
never heard of it.
they were taking like somewhere in the park. There was some sort of gas coming out of the ground from the thermals or whatever, and they were doing something to ignite them. So they would like just spout flames, and they would do it
Oh
around
yeah.
and like party and like set up a little flame like circle or whatever and
Oh
burn
my
whatever they were
gosh.
burning. So it sounded pretty fictional, but I was just curious since I had an expert in my presence.
No, I haven't. It sounds really cool. I there was this almost like a myth, I guess, where you there was supposedly this like a geyser, one of those like really hot pools of water in the ground. And they're really, really hot for people who don't know. It's like a water volcano. But supposedly there was this really particular one where it was just the right temperature and people would go to it to like hang out like jacuzzi style. And no one knew where it was. You had to know someone who had gone there. And I always wanted to meet someone who had been there, and I could be a part of like the cool club, and be like, hey, let's go to that geyser after work. And I still to this day don't know if that was real or not, or if people were just hyping it up. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
well, that was actually in the
there's
book
always
too.
the
So they went
what.
to
Oh,
what
and
in the fictional book. So they went to that
yeah.
place, and that's where actually they would do the flamers
Oh
too.
my
I think
god.
because one of the guys was hitting on a girl or something, and he's like, "Hey, let's go to the thermal, whatever they called it, the hot thermal, and do some flamers."
Yeah.
And like the guy who's like
That
investigating
sounds
was trying
really
to figure
fun.
out what flamers were, and yeah.
That's a
Anyways,
no. I've never heard of that. It sounds really cool though. I mean, the name is really great.
yeah, yeah, it's something. Well, I know writing a book, as you mentioned, a lot of people have that aspiration. Probably most people in some form have at least said once, "I should write a book," and
Hmm.
it's so simple, right? But not easy. Yeah, just write a book, and then there's a million things that come
Yeah.
with that. And I'm
Yeah.
about to finally publish my first book, and I wrote it 3 times. The first two I didn't like, and so the third, like, we'll see.
Yeah.
But there's always like one more thing, and as my good friend Eric always says, I feel like I'm being nibbled to death by a million baby ducks at some times, but it's uh it's coming. So I'd love to know how you serve people through author education, and why that's important to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't really know what to call it, but I've just been calling it author education, like you said. And through a combination of personal and professional experience, personal being writing and doing my own book, and professional being helping to launch and market nonfiction books for business owners. I did that for about a year or so. But there were so many elements that I learned from both sides of that just I was so surprised that people just didn't really know about. So I make it my goal now through content creation and custom individualized one-on-one type work to educate people on, if you want to write a book, here's what goes into it. Um, but especially if you want to publish one, here's what goes into that as well. And, you know, when you're talking about writing or publishing a book, you have to think about strategically, who would benefit from this? Like, who specifically is this book going to benefit or serve? Or, is there a market at all for a book like the one that you have in mind? And if there isn't, would you still want to write it anyway, just to say that you're an author, or just to kind of prove to yourself that you can do it? There's, if you, it's a lot about educating them on what that process is like, strategically, what they have to be thinking about, as well as like managing expectations. Cause like, who wouldn't want to be a New York Times bestseller. Like that's a huge resume booster. That would be great if I got a title like that. Um, but it's also, what people don't know is that it's a super, super convoluted process for how they choose the books that get on their bestseller list. Or, if you want to reach Wall Street Journal bestseller, are you willing to pay $65,000 for a guarantee to get on the list? And it's, if you don't have the capital, it definitely helps to have the right connections. And that's like one of the biggest things that I learned when you're wanting to write and publish a book and do it right, is that a lot of it is about who you know, not just for opportunities, but also for helping to spread word of mouth. This is my message. It happens to be in the form of a book. If you like it and want to support it, feel free to buy it and leave a review. And there's just so many elements that go into writing a book. And the way that I think about it is like, it's just as hard and just as easy as writing it down. It's like writers do anything but write, I feel like. Or it's like you get this idea, you fantasize about it for a while, you're like, okay, I should probably write it down. And then you like, no, wait, I got to check my email. And then you do that. And you're like, no, wait, I should listen to this motivational thing on YouTube to get me in the headspace. And it's a at least for me, and probably for you, it sounds like it's a long process, but like it's a marathon, but
Yeah.
most people will probably say that it's worth it in the end for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, you touched on resistance right there. It's like there's a million other things that try
Mhm.
to prevent us from doing the creative work we're trying to do. And I just reread The
Yeah.
War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, and he talks about resistance probably better than anybody I've ever seen. And he's written a ton of books, and it's just really interesting to listen to his story because it was so much struggle for so long. And I think everybody can relate to resistance, whether the resistance is before, even resistance like cooking dinner sometimes, like we all want to eat, but we can, maybe I'll just look at Instagram for a while and not do that, or whatever the case may be. What is one of the
Right.
biggest mistakes you see people making when they're looking to write a book or they're starting to write a book?
I would say, I think with, it sounds kind of silly, but the first one that came to mind is acknowledging that there's going to be someone who reads your book. Which, what I mean by that is like, if you have a story to tell everything that you need to tell, like get it all out of your system and then comb through it and self edit, knowing that someone else is going to read your book and some parts might not be necessary, or some parts might be a bit fluffier than other parts. And a lot of what you have to say needs to serve a purpose, or it needs to prove a point. So if you have a story that you want to tell, or something that you want to teach, that comes with a story, like get it all out of your system, like write down everything that you need to write down, and then just kind of, self monitor later on once you get it out of your system, like what's worth keeping in and what's worth kind of taking out. And here's a tip, with stuff that you do take out whenever you do publish your book, you can always include like those deleted chapters as a bonus, or like an incentive for, if you buy one copy, insert your email with your receipt and you'll get access to these deleted chapters or something that I took out when I was editing the book. So if people want more of it, like that's a great way to include it without totally throwing it away. But just keeping in mind that someone's going to read what you have to say, and it's worth expressing exactly what you need to express in the right way that you feel it needs to be expressed. So I guess that would be my biggest advice, in terms of writing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good advice. Uh, I think really listening to Leonardo da Vinci's advice, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Keeping things really simple,
Mhm.
because if there's just so much extra, it's overwhelming, and it almost feels
Yeah.
disrespectful when you read a book that has just so much, and you can tell it just doesn't feel like it has a purpose, like you said, and it just feels like they just, not that the author likes hearing
Hmm.
themselves talk necessarily, but maybe like they fall in love with their own writing. And I've been guilty of that in the past. I'm like, man, this is amazing, and but is it amazing to others? I don't know. And then need to be objective about myself. I think that's why it's so helpful to have
Right.
somebody like you to help really just see what you're not seeing, because it's hard to
Yeah.
read the label from inside the box and see what we're really doing.
That's really true. Well, and that's one of the reasons why I decided to hire a developmental editor before I started pitching my book to publishers and stuff, because it's beneficial knowing like what your book's strengths and weaknesses are and kind of how everything matches up. But I also did it because I wanted to know, like as a writer, myself, I wanted to know what my strengths and weaknesses were, or like what my tendencies were, or like, oh, you do really well with backstory, but you don't do so well when you're talking about this other thing. Because I never really did the beta reader thing. I don't know if that's more of a fiction thing, but I had no clue what I was doing when I was writing a book, and I didn't know that you could ask people to read it and
Yeah.
get thoughts on it. So
Yeah.
I did kind of everything myself, and then I was like, yeah, I should probably have someone tell me honestly and constructively what I do great and maybe what I don't do so great, so that with any other project I do moving forward, I can be more self-aware about it. But it's hard. They say kill your darlings, and that's really hard to do.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. You're like, "But I really like this line or this word or
But
this
they need to
thought."
know this.
Yeah. Yeah. But I love the kinda, like,
Mhm.
be real idea, like, sharing the deleted chapters in some way as a bonus for people or something like that, because there's always people that want
Yeah.
more, and, the people that want more, those are the big, Raven fans, and that's great. It's really
Mhm.
cool to reward people that, really support you, and that's what it's all about. We're all in this thing
Mhm.
together, and that's the whole reason we wrote the book, is
Yeah,
to support other people. So, in that
absolutely.
vein, talk a little bit about the power and influence in writing a book that can create for someone.
Yeah, it's definitely twofold. I would say there's a benefit for the reader and there's a benefit for the writer. Because if you I forget who said it. I have the and I've told you this before, Kevin, but I have this thing where I remember quotes, but I never remember who said them. And I think it was oh, I don't even know. I'm not gonna mislabel it, but there's a quote that I heard that was, like, if you don't see the book that you want on the shelf, that's your opportunity to write it yourself. So if you have a particular message that you really want to say, but you don't really hear anyone talking about, or you don't really see any books about it, or there's a particular niche that you don't really feel like is being served, like, what a great opportunity for you to communicate a very particular message to a very particular group of people, especially in the case of nonfiction, but that can also be true with fiction. But and then in the case of the reader, if you are in that niche, then you are blessed with a new book that might very well answer all of your questions, or validate all these worries or hesitations that you have. So if you do share a book like that, and I think it really helps for it to be specific, because the more specific it is, the more valuable it is. And if you're able to communicate that and communicate it well, then you're sort of naturally positioning yourself as a thought leader, or as a kind of a trustable figure, I guess, in whatever that market is or whatever that category is. And that's a really great way to develop a very natural and trustworthy connection with people who might really like what you have to say. And in the case of like deleted chapters or something, if you were going to include that as a bonus, like, that would be a really great way to kind of get more of an idea of like, who are those dedicated readers, like, is there a need for more books like this or more stories like that? So it's definitely like the power and the influence is definitely, it's doubled when you decide to write a book. It goes for fiction too, but I'm a nonfiction, like, I really like nonfiction books, and you can do a whole lot with them. And it's a reciprocal relationship. People get to read it, you get to talk about it, and you get to build this mutual trust and connection where you can just kind of build on each other. You serve their questions and their needs, and they get to get the answers from you. So it kind of works out. It benefits everyone.
So, somebody's listening, wants to write a book, hasn't started. What's the first step?
Hmm.
Go to
So I
laurenericksonofficial.com.
So I have a free book writing course on my website. It's got 8 lessons in it. It's got videos that total up to maybe about an hour, so it's relatively quick. I got pre-written notes for you, so all you got to do is focus. I have exercises and activities for you if you want to go down the rabbit hole. But in addition to that, I would also say to ask yourself a few questions whenever you do get a book idea. I would ask yourself, what is your long-term vision? What are your short-term goals? How would this particular book support both of those things? And what does your version of success look like to you if you did pursue this thing? Would it be gunning for Wall Street Journal? Would it be just selling one copy? Would it just be being able to call yourself an author? I think knowing those pieces as early on as possible will help to make it worth it in the end and offer direction once your book is published. Because there's this misconception that when you write a book and publish it, the publication date is like the end of its life, and it's sort of like, that's totally false. You have a whole other life once the book is out there in the world that you can do a lot of cool fun things with. So if you are clear on those answers to those questions early on, you'll kind of have a little bit more direction afterwards, after the editing, after the formatting after the cover design and distribution and everything. It'll just kind of naturally help with your marketing. So I would say those two things will set you up for success.
What What are some of the fun things in the second life of the book that you can do? You touched on it for a second.
you can do you can a book is a really natural way to do a soft pivot into something new if you're kind of tired of doing what you're doing now and you want a reason to kind of focus on something new. A book is a really great way and natural way to build more credibility. So, with both of those things, if you wanted to get more into speaking, you could. You can say, oh, I am a best-selling author, or I've written this book that serves this niche. There's a need for it. And, for people who want to learn more about that, I happen to speak on this topic. Or if you wanted to do more one-on-one work or coaching, a book is a great way to do that too. It's a really great way to get clients that way. If you wanted to do more author events. You could do book signings if you wanted to and connect with your local community. If you wanted to connect with local bookshops and see if you could get them in to their inventory and their collection. That's a great way to do that too. It's a very natural way to connect with a lot of different people about a very particular subject. Anything that you can think of, you can always involve your book in it somehow. It's just a lot of it's a great opportunity for creative thinking, collaboration, and community building, I would say.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice. All right. So speaking of books, and I know you have a ton behind you for anybody who's listening on audio only. A few of my faves up there for sure, especially The Prophet. Like, oh my gosh, like what a cool book. I have the exact same
So
one,
good.
and it looks really old like yours. Like mine looked like it went through the washing machine or something. Like I don't know what happened to it, but I think I bought it. I think I bought it used. I can't remember. I've had it for so long. But what's a favorite book to read, recommend, or give away? And since that's your genius, we'll give you two. You can choose two favorite books to read, recommend, or give away.
Oh gosh, I would say in terms of you already know my favorite fiction book, but my favorite fiction is The Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. Just his quality of writing is so well done. It's for me, it's just the perfect balance of like. So I briefly worked in education, and we had this term called zone of proximal development, and it's basically like a Goldilocks thing where it's like it's kind of in the sweet spot. It's not too hard, it's not too easy, and I feel like that book for me in particular was like the right level of complexity without being overwhelming or underwhelming. So I like that book. And then my favorite nonfiction, or one of them, I guess, would be On Writing by Stephen King, for anyone
Oh
who's
yeah,
looking for a really solid how to guide when you're approaching writing. It's like a blend of memoir and like technical how to. He's got such good stuff, and it's all wrapped up in a really great sense of humor, in my opinion. So
yeah,
those are
yeah.
probably
Very
my
like
my two
dry,
favorite books.
right? That dry wit, but
Yeah,
his man,
it's so great.
he's a phenomenal writer, and so of course he wrote a good book on writing. But like, I'm not really into the
Mhm.
horror genre, but I still have read a bunch of his books because he's such a fantastic writer, and he's so. It's just
Yeah.
like it's one of the few people that I read. I'm like, man, that's so good the way he just did that. And it's so simple when you see
Yeah,
what he does, but I couldn't do it. But
yeah,
that's why he's just a total master at creating.
right. My copy of On Writing that's right behind me. It's oh my god, if I opened it up, it would just be annotated like crazy. I have like 10,000
Yeah.
tabs in it. I like marked up my book and dog-eared it. It's
Yeah,
so good. He knows
that's
what
how
he's
mine
doing for sure.
looks. It's comical because it's basically the whole thing's highlighted. I'm like, why did I even like highlight anything?
Yeah,
I just like it all needs to be a note.
honestly. I know I just took my pencil and just drew a massive bracket on one page and like starred it like 12 times.
I
Like,
did.
this is I'll just claim that
That's what
page.
I was doing with the highlighter. I was like, I don't want to highlight the whole page 'cause I feel like it's gonna like get soggy and ruin it. So I'll just like draw a line down the side with the
Yeah.
highlighter of everything I want.
Yep.
And yeah, it's really, really good. And I think that was a great
Yeah.
description because it is a bit of a memoir too, and you kind of see where he came from, and
Mhm.
it talks about him writing in this like small laundry room in the trailer they used to live in, and they didn't have a phone. His
Mhm.
wife had to go next door to call him for his first book deal, and for I think Carrie was
Yeah.
that what it was for, and it's really cool. And then
Mhm.
he suggests if you really want to be a writer, you need to read a lot, which duh, but he has a great like book
Yeah.
list at the back of the book too, with like hundreds of books to choose
Mhm.
from, and I found a lot of good books there. And his Great advice. Then he
Yeah.
says write like 3 or 4 hours a day, which that probably loses a lot of people right there, I think.
Probably.
But really,
Yeah.
really cool book.
I like how he described his muse too. Like everyone has a muse, like the person who gives them the
Yeah.
inspiration. He's like, my guy's like a basement guy. He's like polishing his bowling trophies and, like staring at you and
Smoking a
like, what do
cigar.
you got for me? And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
great. It's
I always
awesome.
got a pretty good kick out of that. And then it like kind of like helpful too. I used to do a little bit of TV and film stuff, and I wrote a screenplay once, and it was really helpful for the screenplay for the short film I wrote because he's like, you can start with like a place, you can start with like the idea, and gave you all these different ways to really get started, and just not one way to win. And the way that I wrote the screenplay is like I
Yeah.
knew where I wanted to film it. I was going to film it at this like upscale bar, and so having the idea of the
Mhm.
setting allowed me to really make the story and the details just came to me way easier. So, for however
Yeah.
good it ended up being, who knows? But yeah, I didn't see it on the
That's
Golden
awesome.
Globe show the other night, but we're all hopeful. All right, so favorite book to read, recommend, giveaway, Gentleman in Moscow, and On Writing, definitely recommend those two as well. That's really cool,
Hmm.
fiction and a nonfiction. Well, what's something we didn't talk about that you'd love to share about?
Just like generally,
Yeah,
or
anything you want.
yeah,
What'd you have for breakfast? I don't know. You tell us.
coffee.
Yeah,
That's
hey,
it.
me too.
I would say just generally in life, for anything that you need, hit up the library. I don't know. I've been on this library kick for the past year or so, but if you need a safe place, if you got to get your tax paperwork done, if you want a book, if you want to print out that shipping label for Amazon for that return that you've been meaning to do for a while, if you need to get something notarized, if you want to join a writing group, the library's got all your answers. That's just, I don't know.
Man, it's going on at
The
the
library is
library.
just the first
I,
place for my
I never thought
brain.
about the
Yeah,
notary or
there,
the writing groups. That's really cool. Yeah, and it's full of
yeah.
books, so it's a cool
When in
place.
doubt, yeah. When in
Mm.
doubt, go to the library. That's my
What?
advice.
Great advice. All right. Well, what does freedom mean to you here on the Unlock Your Freedom podcast?
I would say freedom. What it means to me is that it implies choice, and I think choice is really important because it's empowering. Um, it leans on self efficacy, and I think freedom just means that you have the power and the opportunity and the choice to do what it is that you want. That's gonna serve others and will benefit you and just create a whole lot of great opportunities at the same time, I guess.
Yeah, very cool. And where can people go to learn more about you and connect with you? I know you're on Instagram. I follow you there. And you have great
I
content, so it's a lot of
am.
fun. And LaurenEricksonOfficial.com. Is there anywhere else people should go?
I do YouTube videos, so if you want to go down the rabbit hole with me on the business of books, I talk a lot about that. I'm uploading weekly. I it's just under Lauren Erickson, but my username on there is Lauren Erickson, but the O in my last name is a 0. So that's the other place where people can find me. And I have a blog on Substack called Between the Lines, where I talk about very similar stuff, also about the business of books. So if you prefer to read about that stuff, you got the blog. If you prefer to watch it, I got the YouTube. So hopefully you find some more answers there.
Yeah, very cool. Like I said, her content's great. So go check her out. She's got a big brain, big heart, which we love on this show. So one of Lauren's strengths on Strength Finders is individualization, which is which means Lauren's really good at seeing what makes people unique and special, what their strengths are, and how they can use that to create value for other people, which would be incredibly invaluable as someone who's helping people bring their genius into a book. So if you guys are listening and she's resonating, I would definitely go check her out. And I would imagine she did resonate if you made it this far. So she's just a cool human on top of that. So get to know her, and she'll take you wherever you want to go. All right, Lauren, thanks for coming on and sharing with me. I really appreciate your time.
Well, of course. Yeah, thank you. It was a great time. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, you guys, thanks for being here, and see y'all next time.
Alrighty, you guys, thanks for making it through to the end of the Unlock Your Freedom podcast with us. Really grateful to have amazing listeners like you. Thank you guys again for listening. We love you, and we'll see you next time inside the Unlock Your Freedom podcast with Kevin Kepple.